Excited today to be joined by Maxwell Ayamba, who is a journalist and the founder of the Sheffield environmental movement. Welcome, Maxwell. How are you?
I'm great. Nice to have you, Beth, on board.
Really nice to see you again. I think we met in London, was it a year ago, a couple of years ago, maybe?
Yeah, I reckon 2 years ago. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. When I came to House of Parliament. Yeah.
And just wanting to make connections with other Black leaders, because there aren't many of us, are there, running organisations, encouraging people of colour to spend more time in nature.
That's correct. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, it's been a big problem.
Before we get to that, let's hear a little bit about your journey. You're Ugandan?
No, I'm Ghanaian.
Oh, Ghanaian. Oh, I beg your pardon. I've been thinking all this time you're Ugandan. Okay, well, let me start again. So you're Ghanaian? I'm
Ghanaian, yeah. Yes.
Great. What was your relationship to nature and the lands in Ghana?
Well, I grew up in rural northern Ghana. And so basically, I grew up in the natural world. So more or less, my life was biocentric, basically, it was just part of nature. So all we lived for was nature, to be honest with you. And so we had that kind of reverence to nature. And so,
Can you describe for us the habitat? What were you in? Forests? What was around you?
I come from the part of northern Ghana, which is called the Sahel Savannah, which basically is more the Sahara region of West Africa.
Right.
And so basically, it was crop farming. So it wasn't like in the southern part of Ghana where we had cocoa and then the minerals. Back in northern Ghana, it was just savanna land. So just rearing cattle, sheep, goats, poultry, and then the subsistence farming. So basically my life evolved around, farming, and rear of animals. So when I was a young boy at school, I had to make sure I take the goats and sheep out into the pastures to ensure that they graze. And we had a method there where basically, we live in a compound house where my granddad had 16 horses and 40 cattle and loads of sheep and goats. And it was a huge compound. And our duty as young people or children was to ensure that we take these animals out to graze. And also we had to combine that with schooling. So so I had to take them out to the pastures. And then I have to ensure that, we had this system where, because when we let the animals, what we call it free range basis, where they could go and graze elsewhere, and they had shepherds. Fortunately, I wasn't a shepherd. I was just, my role basically as a child was to ensure that I take the animals out and peg them, because basically we just put some kind of rope around them and take them to pastures that we felt they could graze. And we had to do that before we go to school. And when school closes, say lunch, we had lunch break, I had to go again and to move them to a different pasture, because they would have grazed that other part. And also to keep water because of the heat, because where we come from is really, really hot. And so I had to tend to the animals at the same time with my schooling. So this is the way we led our lives. And so basically, and in the evening, we had to make sure that all the animals came home. And we had to count how many. And sometimes some do lose others, so we had to go out and look for them. Especially the billy goats, which normally go around chasing the female goats. So we had to go around looking for them. So it was quite a very interesting childhood and upbringing that made us to be so bonded and so connected with the natural world. And so we paid reverence to nature because it was a source of livelihood. That's where we lived off nature. That's where we lived. And so we had that kind of spirituality with nature and that kind of connection because we believed our ancestors, live with us in the spirit world and exist in the land. So we had things like taboos, where basically, you didn't disturb nature. We have folklore, where we have stories about the importance of life and nature. So we had that kind of hierarchy of consciousness of nature. where we felt nature was more important than any other source of living, because we are part of nature. Without nature, we have no existence. And so we came from nature, and nature shall we go back to. And so that kind of, we gave that reverence.
Yeah.
And so we had rituals like, pouring libation when we are, before before the planting season. And then when we harvest, we have to pour libation again to the gods and that kind of thing. So that's the kind of environment, that's the kind of culture I grew up from, really.
I can hear that very deep sense of connection. There's no separation like we often see here in the UK, where nature's this alien thing that's over there. I can hear it's really part of the daily rhythm of how you structured your life.
Correct. Yeah. Well, like I said, back home, nature was more biocentric because we're part of nature. Whereas in the West, when I came here, it is more anthropogenic, where basically here nature is so commodified and perceived in the Eurocentric way of seeing man above nature. But where I came from, in a more Afrocentric way, we saw ourselves as part of nature, and therefore didn't lord ourselves above nature, and felt that without nature we have no source of livelihood, we have nothing really, and that we have to honor and respect nature and revere nature. And so whatever we did, we did that with nature in mind. So we knew that trees possessed, for example, if you take trees or other species in nature, we knew that they all had a role to play as part of the ecosystem. And so we had to ensure that, that all these things have to be taken into account the way we treat, other forms of life. And so we didn't see ourselves above other forms of life. Whereas here, I came here, is more scientific and more commodified in terms of the way nature is perceived and the way nature is looked at. And so
that detachment in the West.
Yes, the West, I think, yeah, there's that kind of detachment. I think it's also more to do with the West think they use science to fix everything, and that science is above nature. When actual fact, that is not it. Because I think basically without nature, we have no life. Because if you want to look at the whole concept of the cosmos, we are linked to that whole cosmos, and that's how it is as human beings. And so that's the kind of environment or culture that I grew up from. So I coming here is a complete shock because that kind of cultural severance where I had to depart from my roots. When I was awarded a scholarship to study journalism in Cardiff here, when I came, I saw a different ball game when it comes to this thing, because over here, only the privileged, had access to the natural world and that kind of sense. That's the way it was seen. And so to me, I found that very, very strange because at the end of the day, I come from a culture and an environment where that's my heritage. Nature is my heritage. That's my roots. That's where I belong. And that's where I see myself. And so when I finished my course in journalism, I decided to pursue a postgraduate degree, my master's in environmental management and conservation at Sheffield University. And I was the only person of color in my course, and the rest of the students were all white English students, not even a single Black British student or maybe from another part. No, I was just the only person. And it was important for me to pursue the master's because it gave me the opportunity to learn about the cultural and the ecological history of the British landscape and the history.
Just to give us a sense of context, Maxwell, do you mind sharing what decade this is? When were you studying?
99. That 99. That I finished my master's. Yeah. Yeah. So go on. Sorry.
Yeah, I interrupted you.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, go on.
And so you came to study journalism at first. Was that journalism related to the environment, or did you have a change because of your experience in the UK?
No, I was a journalist already in Ghana, where I've written a lot about the environment. And so when I got my scholarship to study, it wasn't related to to the environment. It was just purely journalism.
But your background?
Because my background is journalist and I did investigative journalism. But then when I came and then I finished my course in journalism and discovered that, the environment is my passion, that's my heritage and my roots. And I didn't see any Black people in that field. I felt, it was an interesting field to really study. And that's why I decided to do the master's in environmental management and conservation, because that gave me the degree and the qualification and the professional experience to actually contribute, my knowledge. Because the only way you can understand a culture is by learning it. And so the only way I can understand the British cultural environment and the ecological environment and the history is to study it. And that's what I studied. And that gave me the opportunity to understand the politics behind, the environment in the UK. And it's completely different from where I grew from. So
what was your personal reaction to the UK landscape? So how did you feel about being in Sheffield and Pennines, the peaks, that landscape? What impact did that have on you?
Well, I think as what do you call it? As an ecocentrist, I see nature to be the same everywhere you go. Is this how you create a sense of belonging and attachment to that particular natural environment? I think that is the key here. And so when I came here, I didn't have that sense of belonging and attachment to nature here, because when I came here, it's a completely different environment, a different culture. And besides, to be living in the city and not having that particular access to the rural countryside, as they call it here, then obviously, you don't know what is going out there. So the only time I had exposure to the rural countryside was because I was doing my master's. So I had to go for field studies. And as a result of doing field studies, we went to places like the Pigdish National Park, studied and learned about the moors and all those kind of things. It was just true.
When you say you didn't have access before the master, is that about not feeling comfortable? What made it feel for you that wasn't access?
I just had no knowledge about that it existed. And just like so many Black people have no knowledge that, spaces like this exist. Even though some may be born here, they have no knowledge about the geography of those spaces. So the spaces are so important in terms of how we relate to them. So my only space I knew was Sheffield City, which basically is where, I settled finally when I was doing my postgraduate, that kind of thing. But the wider countryside, the rural countryside, the English countryside, as they call it, wasn't something that I was aware, even though I only got to know about it having done my master's, that there's a place like the Pigdish National Park, and that it wasn't accessible to everyone until, and there was a mass trespass in 1932 by Benny Rothman and his colleagues, the working class, and because, the countryside was controlled by the lords and the aristocrats and those kind of things. And so, it was there for game and for that kind of thing. So you weren't allowed there until the mass trespass in 1932. And then leading to things like creation of national parks, and then coming the Crow Act, and then the freedom to roam. So I didn't know about all these things. These are things that if you're not privileged or if you're not part of the whole thing, you don't know that you don't know. And even, what even made me to have more better grounding about these issues was having finished my master's and, was involved in setting up a charity called SHEBEEN, Sheffield Black and Ethnic Minority Environmental Network.
So tell us about the decision to do that, Maxwell. What influenced you to set up?
The reason why I set up actually the Sheffield Environmental Movement basically was because you don't have Black organizations, environmental charities, really in England working to promote Black role models, or mentors or champions in the environment. And so you want to look at the outdoor sector, it's all completely white. And so it's being perceived or looked at as if it's just a white man's privileged space, and that's it. And so Black people just think it's not their part of space, it's not their space at all for them to want to go there. And even what even brought it home, what brought the whole thing home was when in 2004, my two African Caribbean friends of mine, Mark Hutchison and Donna McLean, then came to me and said, can we set up a Black men walking group? So we could just, walk and talk. And so that's how the whole 100 Black men walking idea came. about, which was modeled around the Million March in America, which is a civil rights system. But even though our group was set up against the backdrop of health and well-being to create space for us to work, but it was also sent out a political statement, which obviously is seen as political because Black people are not seen in those spaces. And so that's how it's seen in certain contexts. Because I remember when I was involved, set up the 100 Black Men Work for Health group, I received a letter from Nick Clegg, who was MP in Sheffield here, from somebody from his constituency who wrote to say, "Oh, Maxwell have set up a group, for Black men, and it's a racist group." So basically, more or less, like I've set up a group for only Black people, and so I had to respond that it's not the case. It's just that Black people don't work, especially middle-aged Black men. When they are young, when they are very active. When they are young, they are very active, but when they get to middle age and going, then they begin to lead this kind of sedentary life. And as a result, creates a lot of ill health problems. Prostate cancer is a big issue among Black men. Mental health is a big issue, diabetes, and a whole lot of, ill health issues. And so we don't have that space where we could go out and walk and talk, to share issues affecting Black people. Right. And so this was it, because, we felt that it's only the barber shops that Black people normally have as their own space to go and, chat and talk about Black issues or Black issues affecting Black men. But that space where people can walk and talk doesn't exist. And that's why we set up the 100 Black Men Work for Health group.
Mm-hmm. And famously, your group was the inspiration for the play Black Men Walking, written by Testament and staged by Dawn Walton, which was an incredible play. I saw it at the Royal Court Theatre in London, and I know it toured the country to rave reviews. How did that come about?
Well, I think, when we set up the group in 2004, like I rightly pointed out, it was just for our health and well-being, just to create space for us to walk and talk. But I haven't said that, it was also another political statement, that basically there's unwritten Black history in the natural world or in the natural environment in the UK. The play rightly depicted, 500 years of unwritten Black British history. Black people have been in England for centuries, but their history has not been written into the landscape. So if you want to look at things like even
how did the play come about? How did they? So you were the inspiration for this play. What was that connection?
Well, the connection was that when we started the working group since 2004, we did a lot of walks to Ben Nevis, Scarfell, and all those kind of things. And in 2018, we were approached by Dawn Walter, who said, she's heard a lot about our play. And she's got this idea about, doing a play, depicting the working group. And he's got this guy called Testament, who's a writer. And so if we could invite them to come along. So we said, yeah, why not? They could come along. So they came, Testament and Dawn came and then worked with us. And then we walked on the road called the Roman Road, which basically is renowned for the first Black emperor, Severus, Septimus, who was alleged to have marched on that road 2,000 years ago with his army, and I understand he's buried in York or Easton. And so that sort of invoked Dawn's memory about Black people really walking on this road. And so the Black Men Walking play emerged from that consciousness of the fact that Black people have been in this country for centuries, but their history have never been written. So that unwritten history is what the play basically was trying to project, that there've been Black people here during the Tudor times, during Roman times, times of enslavement,
and before the Romans, people often use that as their starting point, don't they?
That's right. But all this history, has not been written. And so we want to rewrite that history. So that narrative has to be re-narrated, to make it real, because most of our history has always been written for us, but we want to write our own history. And so the play basically was to project that. And I'm not surprised that the play did make an impact. What rather surprised me is why Black Men Walking should attract so many viewers for the theaters to be full, because what's there about walking? Because walking is, we are, as human beings, we are born to walk, right? That's who we are as human beings. And people walk to pilgrimages, people walk to places of worship, people walk, everything. Walking is part of our life, it's part of our DNA. So for Black men to be walking and to attract so much viewing.
Yeah, something that really is so mundane, but is seen as odd or unusual if Black men.
That's right. It speaks volumes. So basically, that's where the whole issue of racialization of spaces come in when you talk of Black men walking. And so these contested landscapes, which obviously have historically been going on and are still going on now, are things that basically we seem to be tampering with in terms of just going out just to have that freedom to walk and talk and and share. We are not trespassing anything. We just walk and enjoy the space. That's why enjoy our time together. And what is make our walk is very important is the fact that most people tend not to talk things that affect them when they are found in certain enclosed places. But walking provides that kind of freedom. It provides that kind of opportunity for people to express themselves freely without being judged, especially working in a space where and working with like-minded people who face equal problems of systematic racism and other forms of discrimination, and sharing all those kind of lived experience. It gives an opportunity to talk, and that's why walking and talking is so crucial. And that's why my PhD, which is at the moment, is looking at the lived experience of people of Black African ancestry, access and use of Big Beach National Park, is basically to use ethnography to look at how people of Black African ancestry's own experience of these spaces that are deemed as the rural ideal or the English white space. How do they see, how do they relate to those spaces? What do they think about those spaces? And these are things these are conversations that have to be had in order to really bring forth the issues that we talk about. Government policy will not resolve these issues until we really help shape that policy.
We're doing similar kinds of ethnographic research. Obviously, Wild in the City has been researching our lived experience in the natural environment and the reasons why we may or may not have an emotional connection to the natural world. You've chosen to frame yours around a national park. Is that about what's sort of local to you, or is there another reason why you've chosen this particular park?
Yeah, because it's the location of the park, isn't it? It's the proximity to Sheffield and also to Derby. Those are the two cities I'm doing a comparative analysis of my text. And it's also the fact that those two cities have got high representation of Black people settled in there for many years.
How far are you into your PhD?
Oh yeah, I'm now in my second year. So yeah, so hopefully I should be finishing sometime. Yeah, if all goes well.
And are you doing that alongside your project coordination?
That's right. Yeah.
So that's a lot of work.
That's a lot of work. Yeah.
What are you doing at the moment with the project coordination? Are you able to run things at the moment?
Well, with the lockdown, it's tough, isn't it? But I think what the lockdown have also done for me is giving me the opportunity to be involved in a lot of national Zoom meetings. Whereas before, I didn't have access and opportunity to these meetings, mainly because these meetings were all held in London or maybe in places that where you found it difficult to access. But with the lockdown, everything is now online. And so, you can just contribute to these discourses or ongoing debates that's taking place. And so I have been involved in so many of them, like the National Outdoors for All. I've done some talks for areas for outstanding natural beauty. I've been involved in a whole lot of national, events online, which actually has brought my organization to light because not until you are involved in these things, in these organizations, it's very difficult because what I describe as the funds of knowledge or the social and cultural capital, these are things that we Black organizations don't have. And so, the only way we could have these is by having contact with these organizations that are already there and working for a long time, and to make them to recognize our relevance or our importance. Because we have got the cultural knowledge, we understand our people work in the grassroots, we know what the issues are. So we can really work effectively to bring about policy change.
As well as sort of interest from people, have you found that there's been any difference, for example, in funding in the last year?
Yes, I think there seem to be a very positive change in terms of funding to organizations such as myself, my organization, to make an impact in these issues I'm talking about.
Historically, that's been one of the bigger issues for Black-led organizations, is that disparity in access and therefore
Correct.
having a voice. But you've seen change this year.
Yes, well, for now it's good, but how whether it's sustainable is another question. Because you might have been aware of BAME, which I was involved in, for some time, and you might have been aware of Mosaic, all which I was involved in the beginning. I think it's a question of sustainability and resilience that is the problem, because we can't just rely on white environmental organizations to address the issues that we are talking about, because we have a situation here where we have to look at the migration history and trajectory of Black groups in the UK. And so we have to find a way that we have to work with this, because they've got different way of looking at nature and access.
Mm-hmm. But don't you think that's the importance of access to funding, because we understand our perspectives in a way that white-led organisations don't, and perhaps try and tell our stories for us in a way that doesn't quite fit our lived experience?
That's correct, and if the government really wants to be honest to itself, then we should be funded, because we have got that knowledge base, and we've got the connection in the grassroots with our communities, and so we should be seen to be delivering that aspect of promoting, access to these groups.
Unfortunately, it's not just governmental, is it? Because a lot of trusts are independent, and I've spent a lot of time in this last year talking to trusts who've renewed or started to be more interested. Been really frustrated at this insistence that we haven't previously had funding because there's something about our competence or we're somehow beginners, rather than there's a huge amount of expertise amongst Black practitioners and Black organisations like yours. But insisting on viewing it as the issue where you don't have funds because there's something inadequate about you and your competence. Is that
wrong? Yeah, I think that's a wrong notion, because there are very.
As a Black-led organisation, have you come across that perspective?
No, I haven't. I haven't per se, because I think so far all those organizations that have funded me, really, I have had trust in what I do and what I offer, because at the end of the day,
I'm not talking about the ones that fund, but the ones that don't. So the reasons for that disparity.
Yeah, obviously, yeah. Well, you always have that for sure, because there's that disparity for those that don't really. They have that kind of what do you call it, feeling that Black organizations are not really responsible, and I think that's wrong. That's completely wrong, because it has nothing to do with race here, or nothing to do with the color of the skin. It's just to do with your ability, really. I mean, you are a good example. You've done very, very well for a while in the city. So why you shouldn't be funded, is anyone's guess, because at the end of the day, what you're doing is marvelous. And so we do, and there are a lot of white organizations that are doing well, and there are a lot of white organizations that are not doing well. So you can just provide that kind of general statement saying that Black organizations are not doing well, so they shouldn't be funded. That should not be an excuse for not funding them. I think it's basically you have to really work with the organization And I said, like, for example, I said, organizations have to be resilient, because if the organization is not resilient and provided with the resources that it requires, then it's really difficult for the organization to provide that kind of delivery that really is expected of it. And we are not privileged to have that kind of support and resources. And I did mention earlier about, the funds of knowledge and then the social and cultural capital, which we lack. And so if we are provided with these, then I don't see why we can do a good work. Because at the end of the day, I mean, the play, the 100 Black Men Work for Health group, which is part of the national play alone, was a good example of an organization that can really help a group to make a national impact. Through my work, I have taken, groups out. Like, for example, I've taken women from the Windrush in relation to the Harrogate Agriculture Show at Harrogate last year, which was the first time, that they've been out in 141 years. No Black group have been, but I managed to do that. And I have done a lot of work with other minority groups, taking them out fishing, horse riding, foraging, that is look at use of herbal medicine for other kinds of things. And all these minority groups are really interested, because remember, most of them come from rural backgrounds and they got that kind of connection to nature and understand the relevance of nature to their lives. It's just that because they found themselves in an environment or in a society where they are completely severed from nature or disconnected and found themselves in the city.
It's really beautiful to be able to help rebuild that bridge and offer that connection, because as you're saying, often that yearning is there. It's not that they're not interested.
No, if someone tells you they're not interested, that's a lie. They are really, really interested. It's just that you also have to bear in mind that these are communities we work in who are socially and economically deprived. And so time is of essence. How to earn a living and to have time for leisure and recreation. And the concept of leisure and recreation is completely different, because, like I said, back home, nature or the environment is a source of people's livelihood. Whereas here, nature is more seen as a commodity for leisure and recreation and other things. And so where you have a group who are already economically deprived and will have to struggle on a daily basis to survive, where are they going to make the time to go out for walks, in nature, and some of the places to access are quite difficult to access. How are they going to make, how are they able to get to those places to access? Rural transportation is not what do you call it, guaranteed, or it's not distant. And most of these people do not own cars or transport to go out to those places. So what do you expect them to do? And they have other priorities. They have to prioritize these things in their life. So it's how you engage with them to create that understanding that their health is so important, and therefore they have to make time for their health. And that these are resources that are out there that they can take advantage of to improve their health and well-being. Then you can begin to encourage them to really take up these places. But the other problem again is, if people have to struggle on a daily basis, they don't know why they're going to pay their next bill. They don't know, where their next meal is coming from. Walking in nature is the last thing in their minds, right? It's just
such a shame when it is something that's free if you're able to access, and just incredible health benefits. I'm wondering what you do to help connect people in city environments to have that ease of access.
Well, you use the word free. Freedom is a privilege, because, people may be free walking, but actually in their minds, they are not free because of the psychological problems that they encounter in life, what they have to go through. And that is why, you find out that with minority groups, most especially Black people, have a lot of mental health problems. So it is a question of really creating a dialogue and opportunities where you could work with people to understand the relevance of taking advantage in walks in cities. And some of the cities, obviously, the hubs where you have green spaces where these people live are not of good quality. And so that alone is something that really, makes people, to put people off really to want to walk in those parks or those spaces. And so you have to take them out and give them that exposure to spaces that they could go and walk. And that sense of freedom and sense of safety is also another big, big issue, because groups I work with, they have that fear of safety. And so you have to create that opportunity where people could walk in spaces where they feel safe, where they feel welcome, where they feel sense of belonging and attachment to those spaces. And not only that, but have an activity that they are doing that really bonds them to that green space or that place that they are going. It's not just
that sense of entitlement to be there, and that sense
that's
of
right. That's right. You have to start treat. We don't have to treat people like goats and sheep or cattle and just take them out in pastures to graze. No, human beings are not like that. Human beings will have to be treated with that kind of respect, to understand that the space they are in, they also belong to that space, and that they are welcome in that space, and that there's something positive to do in that space, that they have that sense of fulfillment, that they are fulfilled with whatever they get. And so if you don't create those opportunities, people might go our walks and may not want to go back again. And then the other thing you have to understand is people need the right outdoor gear or equipment to be able to access those spaces, because the elements of weather sometimes can be very, very bad and discouraging. And so you have to create the opportunities for people. So for example, my group, I get outdoor gear, from Rohan and other companies that I give out to groups to create that kind of comfort for them to. Well, if you don't have the proper walking boots, you will not. And you walk out and it's wet or it's snowy, you get soaked, you feel cold. People wouldn't want, or proper outdoor coat, waterproof jacket. These are things that if you are privileged, people take for granted.
There are a lot of psychological and practical barriers for some people. Yeah. I'm mindful as you're talking that you are describing perhaps a particularly disadvantaged demographic, and that not all Black people will relate to that, there are people that feel that they do want to go off and wander and experience that freedom, and it's not necessarily a lack of money or equipment, but it is that sense of fear about what they might encounter, not feeling safe.
Yeah, I think not all. I mean, that's why I say we have to be careful when we talk, because as a researcher, I normally tend not to generalize. You do have Black people who are well-to-do, who can have those kind of resources that I just spoke about, but they may also have other barriers. For example, navigation, orienteering. They don't know these spaces because it's not something that they are used to or have been out. So in our group, we have got all kinds of people really in our working group. We've got very wealthy Black people. We've got doctors. We've got, engineers. We've got all kinds of people. And we do have other people too who don't have those kind of qualifications and wealth. But when we are walking, you hardly know who is who. We just walk and talk and share that camaraderie, that is basically what it's all about. Yeah. So at the end of the day, when we walk and we finish walking and come home, everybody just feels excited. And there's a lot to exchange. There's a lot to share. And it's a lot to learn.
What would you like to see for the Sheffield environmental movement over the next couple of years? What are your hopes and goals?
Well, my hopes and goals is, I want a legacy where basically we have more Black people or more minoritized people who are, acting as mentors, champions, and ambassadors, creating a sea of change in communities for people to access the natural world for health and well-being. This is my passion, because at the end of the day, maybe tomorrow I may not be in this world again. So, what legacy have I left? So it's not me alone just doing things for me, but I want to be seen to be doing things for everyone and doing things with others, like, for example, yourself, where we can create that impact and that change. Because I can write and publish, but at the end of the day, if there's nothing practically that kind of there where people are really doing things, because now as I speak, since the lockdown, our group people are so fed up. They are just eager to go out and walk, because they've lost a lot really from the walk. There's a lot that they've lost, but the lockdown is not just possible, which really demonstrates how they value the work, the importance of the work. Before you wouldn't know, but I see that every time now. But we are on a WhatsApp group, and every time people are just hoping that one day. In fact, after the first lockdown, when they lifted the lockdown, that was in September. We had 18 people come on the walk, and then October we had 20 something. Okay, that just tells you, how people are so excited to get on. It's natural that when people are doing things that is benefiting them health-wise, then you don't need to tell others; they will just automatically come.
Yeah.
That's the way it is.
It's great to hear how thriving things are for you at the moment, despite the lockdown and coronavirus. Maxwell, we're going to have to come to an end there, but it's been a real pleasure to speak with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Hopefully we'll get to
so much. Soon. Yeah, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share my story.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. Yeah. See you again soon.
Yeah, and good luck with everything.
All right then. Bye, Max.